Hi everyone! Happy Bat Week! We are BatBnB and we are going to work on getting Merlin added to our chat here. Thank you for joining this morning. Happy Bat Week, everybody. How are you celebrating Bat Week this week? Hello, as you're joining, tell us where you're joining from. We are BatBnB. Hi from Florida. Thanks for being here. I hope you all have been enjoying our vampire bat facts we've been sharing this week. Check out our page. If you've missed any, make sure you're following so that you see the rest coming up for the rest of Bat Week. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. London, awesome. Thanks for being here. We're going to be joined by Merlin Tuttle in just a moment. If you have a question that you'd like to ask him, go ahead and put it into the chat. We'll be making sure to answer as many questions as we can. Kansas City, Missouri. Okay, thanks for being here. We will definitely be saving this conversation to our page afterwards. So if you miss any, you can find it there later on. North Carolina, thanks for being here. Awesome. Yeah, people are just sharing where they're joining us from. Hello, friends. The Barefoot Biologist. Thanks for being here. Edmonton, Alberta. Awesome. We love bats. We do too. Obviously. Colorado. Great. Well, I'm Jess with BatBnB. We are creators of safe, sustainable, and stylish bat houses that were designed alongside Merlin Tuttle, and we'll be joined by him very soon. There they are. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to send the invite again. There we go. Awesome. Happy Bat Week, everybody. Good morning. Hey.
Good morning.
Hi, everybody.
How are you?
Thank you. How you said?
I'm just getting over having picked up some COVID along the way, but I'm already doing much better.
I'm so glad to hear that, Merlin. Happy Bat Week.
Well, happy Bat Week to you and yours.
Thank you. I really appreciate you joining us this morning. So I want to dive right in. We have a lot of people on here that are saying hello and sharing where they're watching from. Could you tell all of us, Merlin, how did you get started working with bats?
Well, I just happened to live near a bat cave, and when I heard about it, I got my father to take me over to see it. We crawled the bats, not knowing anything about. We followed droppings on the floor to tell where they went, and finally came to a kind of a hole in the wall, and I started to crawl through to get to where the bats might be. And about that time, the hundreds of bats on the other side didn't know but what I was coming to kill them, and they panicked and decided they all wanted to get out at once through the same hole that I was trying to come in. And needless to say, I got covered in bats. I mean, literally head to foot, and just lay still and let them go their way, and nobody bothered me. And I found them to be incredibly fascinating and started going back to watch them emerge. Found that they were present only in the spring and fall, but they were supposed to, according to the books, be there year-round, non-migratory. And so it piqued my interest. I got the Smithsonian staff to get me some bat bands. I was just a teenager in high school, and that was the beginning of banding more than 40,000 bats and tracking their movements over 20 years. And that became quite an exciting study that it was hard to turn around and do anything else after I got so far along in something as exciting as that.
Yeah, and you definitely had quite the memorable first experience, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Somebody said in the chat that you must be the chosen one. So Merlin, as we get going here, I know there's a lot of myths and uh, misinformation that's spread about bats, and I know it's kind of been your life work sharing information, proper information about bats. What are some of the things that you still hear about bats that are not true?
probably the most prevalent is the belief that many bats are rabid. Back when I was beginning, virtually everybody thought they knew that bats were mostly rabid, and that not only were they mostly rabid, but they were vicious animals that would attack people, especially women and children. And
Mm.
the sales pitch for pest controllers that often rip people off for huge amounts of money, scaring them that because they saw a bat in their house, if they didn't act quickly, they would breed like rabbits and wouldn't be able to get rid of them, and then they would attack the family. And the beliefs were horrible, but they mostly centered around rabies and that bats would attack. Even today, bats are very often taken advantage of by opportunistic uh, public health people who uh, exaggerate risks from bats. For instance, if you tell somebody, if you go to the health department and say, a bat flew by me last night in my yard, chances are very good they'll say, well, you know, it may not have, but it could have bitten you without you knowing it. And if we're wrong and it did bite you without you knowing it, you're going to die a painful death. And so then they give you the option of taking a series of vaccinations, which they seem to price very uh, much based on what it looks like you might be able to afford, because I've heard documented cases of people spending anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 for their post-exposure vaccinations. So it's very lucrative to scare people, and unfortunately, that hasn't changed over time. Now we hear so much about COVID, but you know, despite one of the most intensive searches ever, there's never been a single case of COVID found in a bat anywhere in the world. I got my
That makes sense.
guarantee you from being around too many people, not being bats.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you sharing that information. That's definitely what we hear the most is concerns about rabies. The next one we hear the most, Merlin, is concerns about having guano near their house. What do you say to people that are worried about that?
Well, if you're not worried about bird guano, bat guano is no more dangerous than bird guano. Any kind of animal droppings could potentially, if you breed dust from those associated with those droppings, you could potentially contract a fungal disease called histoplasmosis. But the vast majority of Americans that get it contract it from birds, not bats. So I would just advise, don't breathe a lot of dust stirred up where any kind of animal defecation is. Some of the worst things come from cats that their droppings can be very bad for pregnant women.
Absolutely. And we, as people that provide bat houses, we hear a lot of concern about guano. But going over to bat houses a little bit, what species do you see using bat houses the most?
Depends on where you live. Uh, in the southern half of the United States, free-tail bats are very often seen. Big brown bats, evening bats, those would probably be the three that I hear the most about. Uh, in the northern part of the United States, it used to be predominantly little brown bats, but their populations are way down now because of white nose syndrome, and so they're not nearly as prevalent in north as they once were.
Hmm. And I know, Merlin, you are responsible for bringing backyard bat houses to the United States many years ago. What are you currently doing with bat houses?
Well, we're working with Troy Swift of Swift River Pecans. He's the president of the state pecan board and a major grower, producer of pecans. And he also, lucky for us, owns his own sawmill and has access to lots of cypress wood that he doesn't cut any living trees. He just harvests wood from those that have been washed down in floods or that get blown down in storms. And so he has a huge supply of cypress wood. And this wood is the longest lasting wood in America outside of redwood. It is extra light, thermally more light, more insulated than most woods. And so he got very interested in what he could do by way of building bat houses to attract more bats to his orchards. He was amazed when he first came down and showed him that he already had 8 bats in his orchards that were helping reduce pests. But he's very interested in experimenting now to see how many more he can attract and how much difference he can make in reducing his pests. One, the case borer moth is a very serious pecan pest in this area. And he points out that if a bat just ate one of those moths a night, that it could prevent, well, a case bearer moth on average is carrying 50 to 150 eggs. And so if you just look at it very conservatively and assume that the moth that this bat eats is carrying only 50 eggs, and you assume that predatory wasps kill off half those eggs before they hatch, then you've got 25 left. But each of those 25 caterpillars that result can destroy anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 pecan nuts. And so if you, again, very conservatively figure that they're only going to destroy maybe 2 each, you still got 25 times 2, you got 50, and then you've got up to 100 bats in a bat house or more. 100 times 50 is a lot of pecans saved. And so even if each bat was just eating one moth a night, they could be making a very substantial difference. So he's working with us now to use what we call barcoding, a genetic typing that by which we can identify pest insects in the bat's feces and which species they're eating and what impact they might be having in protecting his crop. But he's very enthusiastic now and is actually helping co-host workshops, train other people in integrated pest management.
That's incredible. That sounds like a really awesome project to be working on. We have a comment here, Merlin. Someone is asking, are bats found throughout the United States or only in some areas?
Basically, throughout the United States, they occur in all but the most extreme polar and desert regions, and you got to be pretty extreme not to be able to have a bat.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm just checking for any other questions here.
A lot of your listeners' questions could be answered from our recently published book, The Bat House Guide.
Yes, and we have those available. Merlin Tuttle's Bat House Guide. I use this quite often and go through and look at all the information. I really was excited to see the number of bat species that have been documented in bat houses. I know that you told us kind of the most common three, but I know in different regions, like you said, there's different bats that will occupy those bat houses. So that was really neat to read more about those species in your book.
There are many opportunities to expand what we know about bats and bat houses and who can be attracted to what kind of bat houses and what situations. One thing that we strongly recommend in the Bat House Guide is to put up multiple houses. Don't try to make one house meet all needs of your local bats. Uh, Different bats like it warmer or cooler. That's different species, I mean. And also, even within a species, their needs vary through the year. Uh, Troy is experimenting with houses in his orchards, and we find that houses that are slightly cooler are used in midsummer heat, and they move 100 yards or so to warmer houses when they're early spring and late fall when it's cool outside. And, and there's no question that the people who are most successful with bat houses are ones that put up two or more and put them in slightly different situations where one gets more sun than the other, or uh, something where you're giving the bats alternative choices. Actually, most successful bat house users I know of, almost every single one of them start out a failure. Uh, Kent Borcherding, for example, in Wisconsin, put up 3 bat houses in his yard, and as I recall, in several years, he got no bats at all. But then as he heard more about what bats needed, he realized that there's a state park not too far away that was on a lake in good habitat for the bats he was trying to attract. He moved his houses over there, and then they became fully occupied very quickly. After that, he began experimenting, and now he has thousands of bats in bat houses. There are some cases where people have gone from complete failure to tens of thousands of bats in bat houses. The difference between those who succeed and have a lot of fun long term lies in your persistence and ability to test. Uh, each place has slightly different conditions and different bat needs, and if you finally figure out what the magic combination is, you can have a heck of a lot of fun. In fact, if you go to Troy Swift's website, he has a video there under his, I think it's a part on I don't think he's calling it integrated pest management, but anyway, healthier farming. Uh, he's got a video there that would really impress you. It's just a cloud of bats coming back to a bat house in the morning. That house had only been up for about a year.
Wow. Yeah, that's so good to hear because I think a lot of people that we talk to, they put up a bat house and they want it to be occupied instantly, but sometimes it does take time and we have to have patience with that and learn proper placement and all of that. So that is good to hear.
At Troy's place, we put them up in groups of 4, and they were, all of them had been occupied at least for short periods of time within 6 to 18 months. Most of them had been occupied within 12 months. What ended up happening was that he put up several groups of 4 houses. The bats moved around among the groups of four, but they also moved from one orchard to the other and across his orchard at different times, perhaps just to stay ahead of predators. We see hawks sitting there waiting for the bats to come out. It's certainly good to stay ahead of the hawks' knowledge of where they're going to be next. But his same bats seem to be there all the time, and the numbers are building. But they do move regularly among his houses. They're not just sitting in one house.
That makes sense. Yeah, we've seen that a lot too, how they will move around to different bat houses and different options, in different weather and all of that. So that's good to hear too. Merlin, a lot of people are asking, what do you have? Can you pick a favorite bat?
A favorite bat?
Yeah.
One I worked with most recently. uh, I've been incredibly intrigued with the little woolly bats from Borneo. And again, I found them incredible, different species of woolly bat in Taiwan. These are the only bats so far that have taken upon themselves to try to train me. And uh, I am very fascinated by any animal that weighs no more than a nickel that can figure out within hours that I'm good for food and come try to train me to give it to him on demand. These little guys, if you look at the website at Merlin Tuttle's Bat Conservation, you can find a YouTube video that my wife shot of the little woolly bat in Borneo coming up and bumping me in the nose to get my attention to feed it. I had just caught the bat in a mist net the night before, had fed it mealworms out of my hand, went to bed, came back the next morning, and when we came in to work, the little bat was hungry again, and he immediately came out and started bumping me in the nose to get my attention. And I suppose I could have thought I was being attacked, but I knew better. And my wife, it was very hot climate, so I didn't have a shirt on. And my wife said, "Get your shirt on quick. We got to get this on video." And so I got my shirt on. She got the video ready. And this little bat was still being persistent, coming and bumping me in the nose. So she got it on tape, the bat bumping me in the nose. And then as soon as I held up a mealworm in my hand, it immediately came over and took the mealworm from my hand. I find that absolutely mind-blowing. Here's this little bat that weighs less than a nickel, in just a matter of hours learns how to manipulate me to get food.
That's fascinating. What smart little guy. Here's a question in the comments for you, Merlin. If someone were to put a bat house up on a pole, would it be okay if it moved a little bit in the wind, or would that disrupt the bats?
I think most bat houses probably move a little bit in the wind, but it's best to find a place where there's minimal wind. Bats don't enjoy being buffeted in the wind as they're trying to come and go.
That makes sense. Someone just said that was a great story about the woolly bat, Merlin. They loved it.
Well, we know that some bats, like the frog-eating bats that I first trained, I used to think they were the only ones that just the large carnivores that were smart enough to be trained. And it's taken most of my life to finally figure out that even the tiniest insect-eating bats can appear to be just as intelligent or more so than the larger carnivores. The Trachops, we've trained them to like come to our hand on call and then mark them and release them back to the wild. And when they're recaptured years later from the wild, they still remember to come to our hand on call.
Wow. That's so cool. Speaking of the diet of some bats, since it's Bat Week and we're leading up to Halloween, We've been sharing some information about vampire bats since those are really, prevalent around Halloween time. We talk about them and see them a lot. Do you have any stories or any information you can share about any species of vampire bats?
When I first began my conservation efforts, it seemed that every conversation began with what about vampire bats? And I would always turn it around quickly by pointing out that vampire bats are less than 1% of the bat species, even where they occur. And most of what we know about them is misinformation. Uh, they're just a small fraction of the world's bats, yet they get all the publicity, while bats that we couldn't live without are needlessly feared. I mean, we could be practically buried in insect pests if it wasn't for bats and other similar predators keeping them in control. And people don't realize that bats, even where the vampires live, are key pollinators and seed dispersers. They're the most efficient long distance pollinators and seed dispersers anywhere. And they're just absolutely invaluable. But we hear these stories about vampire bats. Vampire bats are actually very intelligent social animals that we'd probably fall in love with if we understood them very well. I once had a young man working with me in the field, and I asked him to tame a vampire for me so that we could film it. And he came back a little bit later. He had it in his shirt pocket, and he was playing with the vampire. He took it back to his room and played with it on his bedspread, and it was a very intelligent, quickly tameable animal. Now, don't get the idea that I'm advocating bats as pets. Bats are difficult. Their needs are beyond most of our ability to take care of. A bat that you can catch is more likely than others to be sick. And, unless you want to be a professional bat biologist, you probably be trying to handle bats. But they are incredible. Vampire bats have been known to, they're very social, and they seem to have long memories of their relationships. One of the things that I could point out is that some bats have been known to live more than 40 years in the wild. That's a huge lifespan for an animal that size. It's like on a par with a human being 100 years old, still able to run sprints through obstacle courses.
Huh.
Vampire bats remember each other and who's their friend and who's done them favors in the past, and they'll risk their lives to have another vampire bat in need. And one young lady who had a captive colony of vampire bats reported years ago that these bats knew her, and if she was gone for a few days and had an assistant feeding them, she wasn't there, when she would come back, they would come down and give greeting sounds like a puppy dog that's excited to see it come back, and they would wrap her fingers in their wings and try to show affection.
Oh, wow. That is so interesting.
Yeah, we rarely hear much or see much of the most incredible sides of vampires. Uh, Most of the emphasis is always on that they're a scourge and need to be controlled. And the truth is that in Latin, and vampire bats are only found in Latin America. They're not in the rest of the world. But they're extremely sophisticated animals, and there's a whole lot of amazing fascination that we could be focused on if we weren't so focused on the fact that they drink blood, which in fact isn't all that different from early humans. There are plenty of human populations even today that eat blood sausage, and in fact the Maasai mix blood with milk. Uh, so blood eating in itself, what I can say is if you're only eating the blood, you're at least not killing the animal.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
But vampires have overpopulated in Latin America because we have cut down the rainforest and introduced cattle that are easy to feed on. And it's not their fault. We didn't, they didn't do that. That's how we've changed the world unfavorably. Now we have to.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that you share so much of that kind of information on your website and through your newsletters. I saw another one just came through yesterday, and I know you are a great source for accurate bat information. So I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing some of your experience and your information. I do want to put out there for people that we do have Merlin's Bat House Guide available. And at BatBnB, we also have some new hoodies, and they do say "Save the Bats" on the back. And $5 from every hoodie is being donated right to Merlin's Bat Conservation. And if you want to do a direct donation, you can go right to merlintuttle.org. So thank you so much, Merlin. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and all your listeners. I always enjoy speaking with you and sharing my knowledge about bats.
Well, we hope to do it again soon, and we will post this recording so other people can see it later on.
Okay, good luck.
Thanks so much, Merlin. Bye.
Bye.